All right, everyone, welcome to Pluck That, episode 2. We're excited to get started with our very first guest for the show. Ted Ludwig is going to be coming up next. But first, as promised, we're going to be starting every show with a bit of a conversation with just the three of us. My name again is Nick Ciraldo. I'm joined here by Mike Boyd and Jonathan Bass. Just to give you a little bit of a reintroduction, since the show is so new. The three of us will be talking about various topics, sharing news, maybe some rants, and then we're going to be interviewing a guest for most of the episodes. And it's a podcast that we're going to be talking about all things guitar, an inclusive environment, men and women, rock, jazz, classical, all the styles, and lots of humor and fun and interesting stories and education and all the good things like that. So that's what this show is going to be all about. So let's get started with the trio portion and sharing with some news. I'll get started. Just this past week was pretty busy for me, actually. First of all, in town, there's now a bluegrass jam. There's a local bluegrass aficionado who has assembled a bi-monthly bluegrass jam, and I went to that last week. Actually, Mike and I went to that together, and I sat in the circle. I'm not a bluegrass guitarist. I am a classical guitarist, but I'm, as much as I can these days, really trying to learn more styles. I'm trying to do that for a variety of reasons. One, for the curriculum that I'm getting started at Southern Miss, where I teach, but also because it is genuinely an interest of mine to kind of branch out these days. So there I was sitting in this circle, and you had banjo players, you had acoustic guitar players, you had violinists, and these guys looked like they had been playing bluegrass since they were 3. I sit down and they said, okay, this is the way it's going to go. We're going to go around the circle. And after each tune, the next person down the line is going to name a tune and we're all going to play it. If you need to, shout the chords, you can do that. And here we go. And by the time they got to me, I just said, I don't know bluegrass. I didn't know. I didn't know one tune to say, but my hope is that, by the second, third, or fourth visit, I start understanding the tunes, I start understanding the style a little bit more, and I can improvise a little bit. One cool thing was that they just called on me every chance they got to try a solo, and I never said no. I just gave it a shot, and I fell over my face many times, but it was a lot of
Oh,
fun.
you rose to the occasion admirably, my friend. It was fun.
Thanks, Mike. That's why I have that's one of the main reasons why I have you on the show. Build me up. So there's that.
Glad I wasn't there.
Yeah.
God, just
um,
kidding. I'm not a bluegrass player.
yeah.
My go-to tune is "Whiskey Before Breakfast."
Whiskey before
That's
breakfast.
yeah. They all have funny names like that.
So like a
Which is
require.
actually a halfway decent segue to my news. Uh, One of my latest gigs was a 15-year anniversary of a recovery program concert that happens every Friday here in Memphis. And yeah, this year was 15 years, and
Happy anniversary. That's great.
yeah, it was cool, man. I'm glad to be a part of it. I didn't start it at all. I have not been there since the beginning. I've been there for I think maybe a year before pandemic. Um, a lot of Fridays. Well, it happens every Friday, but it's a rotating cast of all the mostly pros here in Memphis, and there's a headliner every week. They may or may not be original writers, but um, it's a good time. It's definitely like some place to be on a Friday night. Besides a place you might not want to be if you're
Right.
recovering. You know,
Right. That's really
so.
cool. That's nice.
But yeah, it's a really good thing. It's been going on. John Kilzer started it. Rest in peace. local singer songwriter. Yeah, he started it as I said 15 years ago, and still going strong, getting stronger actually. So it's a good thing.
Right on, man. That's great. Another cool thing happened this week. So, a number of months ago, the our School of Music got a donation of some guitars. A local couple donated a number of guitars um, from their late son's collection. And what's great about this, you guys, I've told you about the collection. What's great about it is that some of our students can now play these guitars to kind of better, immerse themselves in the styles of music that they're studying. Um, One of the guitars was this acoustic guitar, and I wasn't able to let them play it because it's an acoustic electric, and the faceplate that sits on the side of the guitar was broken. It was cracked, and I didn't know what to do. So the first thing I did was I just Googled the guitar, the model, the brand, and everything, and type faceplate just to look for a replacement part. There's nothing to be found. The guitar model is discontinued. They don't make the faceplate anymore. It's gone. So I was getting pretty desperate. I went on Reddit and searched for it there, and it turns out that there's a bunch of people who have had the same exact problem. And some tech savvy people decided to make a 3D printer design for this faceplate. I guess it happened so much that they decided to help other people and put it out there. And in this one subreddit, I found like 3 or 4 different versions of this faceplate. Well, we bought our son a 3D printer like almost a year ago now, and it just has been collecting dust ever since because we could never get it working. Um, and I decided to upload that design that I found on Reddit into the machine, and then I let my son take over this time instead of me sort of dominating the all the different things you can do on this printer, like the temperature of the bed or the speed of the printer, the temperature of the forget what it's called, but the where the plastic comes out and everything. So he dialed it in. He nailed it. And thank goodness, because he printed us a faceplate. And, for our YouTube viewers, you can see there it is.
Wow.
This part right here is the faceplate that I was able to install on this guitar. And so now they can play that guitar, and it's just freaking awesome. I'm so
Yeah,
proud,
that looks great.
so happy about that. So that was new.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you. The final thing I'll say is that I played an orchestra gig on the coast. And, you know, some of our listeners might be thinking an orchestra gig, guitarist, what is that all about? Um, it was like a pops concert, kind of a jazz thing. They had a singer doing a bunch of songs that Somewhere Over the Rainbow, Wizard of Oz. What is her name? Oh my God.
Judy Garland.
Judy Garland. Thank you. She basically channeled Judy Garland and sang a bunch of her tunes. And so there was a rhythm section for that orchestration, and I was able to play with that. And I think in a later show I'll talk about like what it's like to be a guitarist to play with an orchestra. But it was an honor. But there are various interesting challenges with doing that, especially on an electric guitar. So there's that. Boyd.
Well, it's mid-semester, midterm crunch, and fall break. So musically, I last week or so haven't had as much going on. I was fortunate to take a really great trip with my family. My daughter is in her first semester of school, so we're able to meet up in North Carolina, do some very special things. So I'm thankful for that. But at the same time, you two gentlemen will know this, that I'm currently in a little bit of a phase regarding some music gear that I have that I've been fortunate to have for many years, but found myself not playing some of these great instruments as much because I've just gravitated to some other ones. And after a number of years of kind of going back and forth, decided to thin the herd a little bit and instead work to get a couple of guitars that I might, feel more comfortable playing or play more often. And one of them came in this past week, and I haven't really had much of a chance to lay hands on it yet. But what little I've been able to play it, I've been really impressed with. So
What is
that's
it, boy? Tell us what it
been
is.
well. I took a chance on a company that Jonathan turned me on to, Kiesel, that does custom builds very affordably when you get into that custom market, and really designed my own instrument on their builder and went back and forth with them to make sure it'd be right. And it's a S style guitar, but I've been really impressed with it. They have done amazing work on that instrument, so I'm really looking forward to beginning to put it through its paces now.
And for those of you who
Not
don't know
endorsed by Kiesel, but
yeah,
we but
yes.
we're open to anything.
If should Kiesel be listening,
Yeah.
we like your guitars.
Yes,
And for
wonderful instruments.
something that Mike said just a second ago, an S type guitar. For those of you who don't know, that means a guitar that is in the shape of a Fender Stratocaster. S for Stratocaster.
That's right.
I think we have a broad audience, and it'd be helpful to, you know, all the terminology out there.
You're right.
Well,
And next
let's.
week, thumb picks.
Yeah.
Happy to talk about that too.
Well, what I'd like to get to next is rants. So, on this show, we may have opportunities where we want to complain about a certain thing. And it may be something that one of us has a problem with, and the other, the
I don't
other
have a
two
problem
can
with
kind
you, Nick.
of. What I mean is, somebody may say something like, "I don't like this," and then there might be a counter argument, and we get into a spirited debate about it, which I would welcome. Or we can all just sort of agree and move on like a bunch of curmudgeons. So I've decided that I have a several part series of complaints about my very first topic because there's just so many facets to it that I don't want to bore you all in one episode.
Can't wait. What?
It's guitar competitions. I want to, yeah,
Oh,
guitar competitions. So,
at what age or all age?
uh, okay, that's a good question. I'll try
What
to limit.
stage of career? Let's put it that way.
I'll try to limit it to that stage where you're at the what they call the outset of your career. Like college level competitions or competitions where you might be, you know, under a certain age, but you're still kind of in that zone where you're still trying to do competitions. You're not quite fully in. You don't have like a full-time teaching position or a full-time concert career. You're those kinds of things.
All right,
So
we should
like
pause for a second because you mentioned explaining things to all types of audiences.
yeah,
So unless I'm sorely mistaken, because I was only in the competition world when I was in college.
okay,
This is not purely, but mainly in the classical world.
yeah. So classical guitar
Is that fair to
competition.
say? Is that
Yeah,
fair? All right. Okay.
that's fair. That's fair. So the thing I'm just going to say this episode is that I think there are too many guitar competitions. I was discussing this with a colleague just earlier today, and we both agreed that there are just too many. Um, there is not much different among them. It seems as though every time that there is a classical guitar festival of any type, it basically is a competition at its core with some concerts around it. Um, and a lot of the people that come to the so-called festival are really just coming for the competition. And so, you know, that's maybe something we can talk about down the line, but I just think that there's just too many. It's one of the many problems with that is that you have many students going to as many competitions as they can with the same repertoire because they have no time to learn new repertoire. And
Right.
when they don't have time to learn new rep, they're not proceeding through their degree. They're not, uh, enriching their education. They're just kind of basically hitting the competition circuit for a year or five. Um, playing the same old stuff weekend in and weekend out. And that's just a problem for me because I feel like as a musician, you should be learning new rep all the time. You should be growing. You should be learning. You should be, maturing. And it just kind of locks you into a particular zone. They may not be getting much better, but there is, I should say, in their defense, an opportunity to kind of improve their performance competition after competition since they sort of develop nerves for it as they go. But I just
Yeah.
think that there are too many, and the fact that they're many of them are very similar, like all first round, second round, 7 minute, 10 minute, very limited kind of constraints for these for the rules and guidelines. Just I think has people, especially in this this career period, just not they're just kind of in a circle really for a long time, and I don't like that. One of the things that I was thinking about doing was having a completely different type of competition because I have many different, you know, issues with it. As I said, one of the things that I would like to do is have what I'm going to call a guitar Olympics. And so, you go to a guitar competition and there's so many different things that are hard to judge, right? It's a subjective thing. It's an art form. It's really, really hard to judge these things. I've judged them myself many times. I've been in them, and there's sometimes controversial outcomes and so on and so forth. But what if we had a competition where, not make fun of it, but just sort of have a different thing, which would be fun, I think, and interesting, is have um, fastest 1 octave scale, fastest 2 octave scale,
Right.
fastest 3 octave scale with rest stroke, with free stroke, starting with INM, INA, and all the different fingering patterns. I mean, it's
Yeah, I
objective.
couldn't agree more because okay, so I never would have thought about putting it that way, but that sums up to I mean to me, and don't get me wrong, I'm not really in this world, so it's not fair for what I'm about to say. I mean, I think one competition is too many. So what you're saying, the way I'm hearing it anyway, is exactly what competitions reduce otherwise wonderful repertoire to. You know what I mean? So why not just like dismiss all that other stuff because in so many ways you're looking for perfection, you're looking for athleticism in the arts, whereas don't get me wrong, there
There's
should
always
be artistic
exceptions.
expression in
Yeah,
athleticism and there should be athleticism in the arts. I don't have a problem with that.
yeah.
But when you become reductive, that just takes away from the overall experience for everybody, And so why not just go, yeah, fastest, yeah, 100%, fastest rest stroke scale, let go, 1 octave, yeah.
I just think it'd be really fun. You could even, since we're in an international community, people could represent their countries. Little prizes for each of them. Like the 100 meter, the 200 meter, the 400 meter. We got the 1 octave, the 2 octave, the 3 octave.
Well, I mean, you say all that, and you know, competitions, they are what they are, but there's so much pressure, and they're not always a lot of fun as a result of that, especially people who are new to it and have not gotten used to what that means. And that seems to add a bit more of an element of engagement to it and opens it up more than just a single prize competition. And these are things that we do anyway, within our practice routine. We challenge ourselves. And hopefully it will be again that, inclusive environment to where we can, encourage one another.
Yeah.
I think the only positive thing that I took away from competing, I mean, and I never would have done it. I mean, I was made to, like we had to as students to participate, and that was fine. That's part of the program. But the positive thing that I took from it was there's no more critical audience than a judge's table, you know? So because they're not listening for, I mean, if they're moved or whatever, fine. Maybe they will be, but they're not there to be moved. You know what I mean? And that might be unfair for me to say. I know it's unfair for me to say, but anyway, I'll go back to the positive. The positive thing for the student, for the competitor, is that they learn to play for a critical audience, and they, get used to playing, in a very stark environment, where people are intently listening to you, right? And there's no more nerve-wracking performance, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I was less nervous at my senior recital, than I was for any competition that I knew
Mhm.
didn't matter in the grand scheme of things. It wasn't for me. I wasn't performing for me in any of those competitions. It was
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
let me get through this without a mistake. Like that's it.
Yeah. Well, so anyway, this rant will be in several parts. Just heads up for everyone listening. The
I didn't mean to bogart that rant. I'm sorry.
No, no, that's okay. Just the main point is
It
that
was a
it just
wonderful rant.
yeah. I just think there are too many, and they're all pretty much the same, and something needs to be done about it. I throw out one idea. If somebody copies it, shame on them. But hopefully one day I'll be able to get that going as just a sort of a fun alternative. And I'll stop my rant. All right. Now I think it's time to get to our guest, Ted Ludwig. So excited to have jazz great Ted Ludwig with us this in this episode. Let's get started. Ted Ludwig. Ted, it is so nice to have you here today. We're very excited to have you. Thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, it's great to be here, Nick. Thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure.
We're totally honored. I mean, you continue to have an extremely impressive career as a recording artist, as a performer, a live performer, and as an educator. And we're just really happy to snag you for a few moments this evening for this podcast episode.
Well, really, it's my pleasure. I'm happy to be here.
All right. Well, we were just hoping to get some questions in and maybe bring you along as well for some topics that we could all kind of discuss as a group. And
Hmm.
that should cover it.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right. Well, so I know that you're from New Orleans,
I
and
am.
yeah, and it's just about 2 hours from Hattiesburg, where Mike and I live, where Jonathan used to live. But I guess you guys are neighbors now.
Yeah, Jonathan, are you living in Mississippi, but like kind of just south of Memphis?
Yeah, I'm in Olive Branch. It's like a
Oh,
suburb of Memphis. So
yeah, sure, absolutely.
So
everything in Memphis takes 30 minutes to get there.
so I'm not from New Orleans, but I try to make it there as much as possible. Every time I go, I try to consume as much music as I can, and I'm always impressed. And just the rich history there is so inspiring. I'm wondering, since you're from there, you know, could you speak to how that has shaped your style or even your technique or your playing, things like that?
Well, yeah, I mean that's a great question, and I mean, growing up in New Orleans, I was exposed to so much great music, and my dad was, he was a performing musician, and my mother was a teacher, and so I just remember, some of the real legendary players in New Orleans being around, people like Johnny Vodakovich and the Marcellus, Mr. Marcellus, Ellis Marcellus, and I remember being around those folks at a pretty young age because my dad was performing with some of those guys, and of course, you know, this great arranger named Charlie Brent. I remember him being around. He did the arrangements for the Loyola Big Band, but then he ended up going with um, um, uh, Wayne Cochran and the CC Riders, when Jaco Pastorius, was in the band, and of course, Charlie, he did all of the arranging. In fact, he taught Jaco when Jocko was just a young kid, about arranging, and so that heritage of being around those musicians, it was always, um, instilled in me, and I just picked it up.
You said your dad was a musician. What did he play?
My dad was, well, yeah, he's still around. Back then he was mainly known as an alto player, alto sax, but now he's doing more tenor sax. He's not really active as a jazz musician. He just plays in some bands and on the side, just as a hobby. So he's not really a professional musician in
Yeah.
that sense.
And you mentioned Ellis Marsalis. Did you work with him?
I did. I studied with Ellis, so he was the endowed Coca-Cola endowed chair of the University of New Orleans Jazz Department, and so I wanted to study with this great guitarist named Steve Mazakowski,
Yeah.
who's pretty legendary in New Orleans scene, and so. Growing up, I just kept hearing this name, Steve Mazakowski, and so I really wanted to learn from Steve. I'd gone out to hear him a bunch of times, and so he was teaching at University of New Orleans. So I went there, and of course, Mr. Marcellus was the head of the program, and that's how I met him. And he was so welcoming, and really, really just like, I didn't know what to expect as a kid from the suburbs. I went there, and he was just so welcoming, and really gave me a lot of great advice, a lot of great feedback. And so, yes, working with Ellis was fantastic. His teaching style was different. I mean, and I've talked to different musicians who have interacted with him in different ways, and everybody has a little bit different story. But with me, it was mainly he just let me kind of work my way through the things that, I would do a transcription and I'd play it, and he would say, "Man, it sounds really great," you know. Or he might say, what do you think about this part?" That, and I would say, "Well, Mr. Marcellus, I think I could have played that a little better." And he'd say, "Well, now you know what you have to work on." And that was kind of his way of teaching. He was not the type of teacher where he sort of beat you. At least that's not how he was with me. Neither was Harold Batiste. It was more like they would let you discover things, and then he would say, like, and he would just, kind of get into a little discussion. So, what did you think about that performance, or what did you think about the way that you approach that harmony in the tune, or and then you could sort of, he'd let you like kind of decide whether you thought it was right or not you know
Coming from for me, coming from a classical guitar background, it's interesting to hear you talk about that because I think most people like me study with just guitarists. It's a rare experience, but it's always such a rich one to be able to study with somebody outside of your instrument. And
Mhm.
so it's interesting to hear you talk about working with Ellis in that way.
Yeah, I mean, like I mean, of course, I needed to work with a guitarist too, so I got to work with Steve, and one thing that Steve had me and several other students do, I think it was a really good thing, was he made all the jazz students take a semester of classical guitar, because he knew that the classical guitar teacher would be the best way for us to learn about the right hand techniques that we needed to learn about proper technique. And actually, Steve, when he sits down more like a classical musician. He sits down like, he doesn't use a footstool, but he'll prop his foot up on the side of the chair, to lift his leg up, and he'll kind of, so he doesn't play like off to the side like this. He plays with the guitar like a classical guitarist does. And he had his right hand is, pretty trained as far as that goes.
So roots in New Orleans and growing up in that environment, improvising and getting into the scene at a very young age. How would you say your style, your improvisational style, has changed over the years?
Well, you know, that's a good question, because, I remember my dad told me this story, and I think it's going to relate to this. But my, you know, my dad, being an alto player, he idolized Cannonball Adderley, and so there was a point where Cannonball came to New Orleans and to Loyola University, where my dad was doing his degree, and this is in this in maybe the early 70s, like 71, 72, something like that. Cannonball came as the clinician, and my dad was the top alto player. So they did this concert together where they played back and forth. And my dad, from idolizing Cannonball at a young age, he copied all of Cannonball's stuff. He transcribed, which is, by the way, I'm going to interject this. If you're trying to learn to play jazz, you've got to transcribe. There's no other way around it. You have to get this language off of records. You have to, there's no way of just like making it up yourself. It comes from something, the language. Just like we make up a sentence. Well, the sentence is based off of the English language. And there's, so we learn certain phrases in speech, and so those are sort of the certain cliches that we all say, but we mix the words up to have different meanings, right? And so the same thing with music. We have to learn the language from somewhere. So we transcribe, and we learn from those transcriptions. But I want to get back to what you were saying. So my dad was playing with Cannonball on stage, and Cannonball at this point was maybe in his late 30s, or I don't think he was in his early 40s yet. But he was getting a little older. And one thing that my father asked Cannonball is, he says, what is it about your playing that's changed since like when you were started off playing with Miles? And he said, Cannonball laughed and he goes, when you get older, you learn to conserve. And I've never really thought about that until I actually was thinking about, you had sent me these questions to sort of think about. And that's one of the things. I mean, I definitely want to let it rip, and I want to give, I want people to hear me play things at a high level. But the conserving thing is also, it's not as much trying to conserve your energy, but it's trying to hold back on giving everything at once. We used to call this spilling the beans. If you hear a young player, and he gets up there and he plays and he just lets it rip right from the first measure of his solo, and then at the end, his solo never really went anywhere because he started up here and he ended up here. You have to learn how to sort of conserve at the beginning. You have to be patient, develop your solo. So those are the things that when I was younger, I didn't do because I wanted to set the world on fire. I wanted everybody to hear me playing at my best all the time. And then I realized, hey, you don't that doesn't make a good solo. So you need to, and I don't necessarily think that was the context that Cannonball told my dad, but it still is relevant in the way that you have to be patient. And I think I've shown a lot more patience in developing my solos, and really trying to give it all when the moment is right. But also at the beginning of your improvisation and beginning of your solos, not spilling the beans. So that's a big thing. I think that as you get older and more mature as a musician, you learn how to do. And as far as language, you're always developing language. I mean, but I mean, you still have certain aspects of your playing that were in your style 20 years ago. You know, so it's you're always sort of editing.
Yeah, the more you read, the better your vocabulary gets. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and so the more you listen, the more and so like I said, it's important. Like, and for me, teaching's been a really great thing because I work on transcriptions with my students, and it's like, oh, well, guess what? I got to learn this thing too that I'm teaching them. I got student working on a Grant Green transcription right now. It's like, oh, well, that's a great line. I didn't know that line, so I get to learn it too and internalize it. So, working with students is a great thing for getting better yourself.
Big topic. I mean, I think about this too, my own playing. I mean, um, I think early on I was also kind of ambitious, and then, but not as cultured musically yet, but
Yeah.
I have this fear that as my technique dwindles and my musicality raises, there's like this opposite thing going
Well,
where
I mean, I think that happens, to a certain degree. I think that's a natural thing, but I mean, you're definitely, one thing I'm noticing is as I get a little older, is that I find I have to warm up before a gig a little bit. Like I used to just never warm up. I was like I was always ready. I could walk on and it just things were just perfect, and now it still can get that, but it takes me like 15 minutes to get into it. So if I know, hey, it's going to take me 15, like maybe the first tune or two to really get warmed up, I don't want to give the audience a crappy first and second tune. So, I try to, first of all, in my set, I'll try to select something that I can open up on a little bit to start my set. So I'll pick a tune that, like I usually start my set with this Pat Martino tune called The Visit, and it's a great tune to just it's in three, but it's a great tune to just like you can just open up on, and kind of it's just a good warm up, you know, for me, and then the rest of the set usually goes well. So if anybody that's come to my shows that they, and I'm not talking about shows that I sort of feature other artists, but I'm talking about my shows where I'm the feature. I usually open up with something like that, and then I'll warm up for a half an hour.
Can I I'm going to steal one of your notes, Nick. You said, how does the venue affect your outlook and your performance, right? So I'm going to build on that, and we'll come back to that for sure because I like it. But you're from New Orleans.
Hmm.
When I met you, I don't know if you remember because that was like 16 or 17 years ago. It was at the Capitol Hotel in Little Rock.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were doing it. I didn't know you were playing there. I was my wife and I were hanging out in Little Rock at the time, and we
wow.
stumbled upon some jazz, and I introduced myself. And but in your transition to a different part of the country, a different playing environment, um, well, I guess that assumes some stuff. So is it so different? What is different, if so? And have you approached networking and all the things that you do in this part of the world?
Well, that's a great question because it's not easy. This part of the world is not easy for a jazz musician,
Right.
and I've always, I mean, I live in Memphis. I mean, I like Memphis. There's a lot I like about Memphis. And my wife plays in the symphony. She's in the choir. She's as she's assistant principal, second violin. So I mean that keeps us here. But I have to. I mean, first of all, I'm very fortunate to have a series that I put on that I get to bring artists in. So I kind of can say, well, who do I want to play with? Who are people that I want to network with? And I can bring them in. So I've had, some of the greatest players. I mean, I've gotten to play with a lot of the greatest players in the world. I mean,
Feel
I've
free
been
to
really.
plug that, by the way. That's the joint, right? Is that
Yeah, I had this series. It started off called Jazz at the Joint, and it still is. It was we first started it in Little Rock, and then we included Memphis, and that became in Memphis. It's called the Modern Masters of Jazz. It's the same series basically. I bring in a guest artist. We do two shows, but they bill it as two different things, and I use different guys in Memphis because I want to support local cats here in Memphis to play, and then the same thing in Little Rock. I mean, if and sometimes I have to bring the Memphis guys to Little Rock or vice versa because of somebody might be out of town or something like that. So this month we had Danny Gottlieb, great drummer, and so but the bass player in Little Rock couldn't do it because he was out of town, and so I got a Memphis bass player, CJ Manning, to play both shows, and then I had an extra spot that I could fill, so I put Art Edmiston in. So it was me and Art and Danny Gottlieb and of course CJ, and so
yeah.
we did both shows together. But I bring in every month a great artist, and so I mean I've had all kind of different instrumentations from I mean like well just this year I've had Russon Barber. I had Randy Brecker was one of my guests. I had Jaleel Shaw, who's unbelievable. I had Joe Locke, the great vibraphonist. But I've had like over in the last couple of years, a lot of great guitar players. Peter Bernstein and Mike Moreno and Bruce Foreman and Ed Cherry, Jocelyn Gould, all kind of different people, to come in. I have a guitarist coming next month, Ricardo Grilli, and I mean, lots of different great players. So I've been fortunate, to do that.
Where
And
do
so
you
that helps me to network. So you asked me about networking because I can kind of it's a way of sort of connecting with guys that I don't have to go to New York to try to connect with those guys. I can bring them here, you know, show them a good time, play some great music, introduce them to all the folks around this area, and it's that, and that's why I do it, So, but I started that in 2019. Of course, we had a couple of bad years in there because of COVID, but we've been rolling pretty strong ever since.
Where do you host those? The ones in Memphis and the
The
ones in
ones in Memphis are at the Crosstown Arts Green Room, and then the ones in Little Rock are. It was a place called the Joint. We called it Jazz at the Joint, but it's got a new ownership, so the new venue's called Birdies. It's the same venue, it's just got a new name called Birdies, and so that changed over this year, like back in May. So, but we still call it the Jazz at the Joint series.
Yeah. Going back to Jonathan's question about the venue, the one that he wanted to build on, that's, so this is a podcast about all styles of guitar, not just jazz, not just rock, not just
Sure.
classical. And
Of
I'd
course.
like to make I would like to make as many connections as possible. And so coming from the classical world, if I go out on a big stage with an amazing sound, I'm super inspired, right? And if I go on to some small little, auditorium or something like that, and the sound is terrible, it's kind of a different outlook. So that was actually my question. Like, as a jazz performer, you go in, it could be a club, it could be a bar, it could be a hall. Does that affect anything from how you play the tune to how you improvise, how you interact with the group?
That's really a great question. I mean, there are some clubs that you struggle with based upon like how the band is laid out. One thing that I find that's really important because I do play archtop guitars, big jazz guitars, and so I don't play like a Tele or something like that. So what's important for me is I've got to have the amp in the proper spot. If the amp is on my right side, the sound hits the back of the guitar and you're more prone to feedback. It's just part of it. So like one club that they tend to put the guitar player, like they have a sound man, like when I play at Rudy's in Nashville, which I love playing there, but they tend to put the amp where it's on the right hand side, kind of underneath. I'm talking about like if you're looking at the stage, it's on the left, but if you're standing on stage, it's on your right. So the sound hits you right in the back of the guitar. So I always, when I go and I ask the sound man before we set up, I say, look, I really would prefer to set my amp up on the left hand side. So that way I don't have those feedback problems. But yeah, I mean, it depending on the venue, if it's a cramped space, for me, it's more difficult. I don't like to play in a real tight, cramped space. So if I'm playing on a larger, like kind of a little more spread out, like at the green room, there's more room to spread out. Or at like when I play at GPAC, like I did a gig with Tony Monaco, great organ player at GPAC a couple of months ago. And It was great because you have a lot of room to sort of spread out. It's just more comfortable. But yeah, I mean, you're right. There are some clubs that are extremely small, you know. But then some of them have a really great sound. Like I played at Mesro. It's very small stage at Mesro, but I really love the sound in there. I felt like I got a good sound in there.
Is it ever awkward to play in like a theater environment, like where you have people coming for like a classical concert almost coming into a concert hall, but it's a jazz concert? Is that ever odd for
Well,
you?
it's funny. And I actually performed. Did 5 performances. I had a piece that was commissioned by the Arkansas Symphony, that was commissioned for me to play with the orchestra. So it was
Yeah.
called Katrina, and and man, you talk about scared, man. I mean, I hate to say scared, but like I had no experience, like how to read a conductor and how to deal with that, and so I'm like, he's waving his arms, and I mean, and all the musicians in the orchestra knew what was going on, but like, I mean, I needed it beat it out, but I needed to see, this, I needed to see real clear, because I wasn't used to seeing that. So
Mm,
that really kind of threw me for a loop. But, there was another part that was like, hey, nobody knows what this piece sounds like. It was an original composition, by DJ Spar composed it. So I'm like, well, if I make a slip up here and there, nobody knows this piece anyway, right? You get more nervous when you have to play, like, like something like Jingle Bells, because if you make a mistake in Jingle Bells, every
Exactly.
single person in the audience is going to know,
yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that was a different experience. But you know I find there's something about an intimate setting where people are right up on you, and I love that. It's a way to really connect with your audience. um where you're on a stage and you're playing out into a larger group of people, it's a whole different feel. It's so it, but the intimacy of playing in a setting where the audience is right on you, I mean, like, they could literally reach out and touch you, is there's something that's intimidating about that. In some ways, there's something really beautiful about that too.
Yeah.
um but I've been lucky to have both. I've played for, I've played at the FedEx Forum for a packed house. It wasn't a jazz gig. It was actually a special tribute, Elvis music, the thing that we did with the Royal Philharmonic.
Hmm.
And my wife was playing on that, and they needed somebody to play rhythm guitar. So I mean, I was literally playing parts that my, year and a half, 2 year students could have actually pulled off. But I mean, um, but it was neat to connect with an audience like that. It's just a different vibe.
Well, on the same thread, uh, uh, it be it a venue or the type of crowd or whatever, you
Mhm.
know, I've played for both situations where it's usually when I play it's at a bar situation. It you might be right up close to the audience, you might not be, but typically it is uh, for lack of a better word, a free for all. You know what I mean? Like people can talk, people can
Yeah,
do whatever they want to, right? And then I've played situations where, it's a hush hush, it might as well be a classical concert, right?
right.
And I know you have too. So which do you prefer and why? Or do you prefer, does it depend on the
Oh, I mean, to
on the
play to
situation?
play jazz to play jazz. I mean, as you know, I mean, I prefer to not play in an environment where people are like talking real loud. But I like we were talking about the Capitol Hotel. I mean, that was a situation where when I was playing in the bar, I mean, you couldn't tell people as to, could you please hold it down for the music, and enjoy. That's not what they were there for. They were there to party, have a good time,
Yeah.
and you were there to entertain them, but also not be too obtuse, too loud, so you had to sort of know your role in that situation. But I mean, I much prefer playing for an audience that's listening and is applauding. And yeah, I mean, when you have a good responsive, I mean, but also what's really can be bad is that I've played for some audiences where they just don't really know when to clap, or they just don't have, you're playing for some audiences where the folks that come, they're enjoying the music. A lot of times they really are enjoying the music, but
Yeah.
they just don't know how to be an audience in the jazz sense, in the sense of hey, the solo's over, let's clap, or but then they might clap at the end of the tune, and if they do that, hey, that's fine. But they just don't know, or they, I don't know, maybe they don't want to miss the next thing. I don't know exactly, but I think it's more the first thing. I think they just don't know when to clap, and how to really be an audience in that particular environment.
Yeah, it's a lot of give and take in those situations because when you're playing, I mean, be it straight ahead jazz or maybe jazz on a little edgier vibe. It When you're in the noisy situation where people are talking and everything in a bar situation, and then all of a sudden you look up and half of them are paying attention, you're like, oh.
Hmm.
Like, yeah, like we must be doing something, because
Absolutely.
5 minutes ago they weren't paying attention to us, but now all of a sudden they stopped
Yeah,
talking and
something
everything.
something
So
caught their ear,
yeah, it's kind of
and
dynamic all of a sudden.
and then there's times where it just depends. Like for me, like if I'm doing, I have gigs where the gig is really important. Like it's like I've got to play my best. I want to, like, I'm playing with this great musician and I want to play my best. And you want to be, you want to, it's all about having a great performance. You do 4 or 5 of those, and then occasionally you're like, oh well, man, it'd be nice to have a gig where you're just background music, where you can just make a paycheck and you can just like, you can just like, not, I mean, I'll always care and I'll always try to play my best, but, where it's not as much pressure, than say when you like have to be on,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know, um, and it's funny. I was Frank Vignola was talking about something the other day, and he's so right, man. We talk about, and I'm very good friends with Jimmy Bruno, and Jimmy and I talk quite a bit. And one of the things that Jimmy said, and Frank was talking about this too, was that we always have to be on. Like I can't even, and like, okay, so for instance, my wife had a lesson that she was teaching out in Germantown, and I happened to have like a little open gap. I said, "Well, look, it's traffic, a lot of traffic. I'll drive you out there." So I drove her out there, and I went to a music store that's out in the area, and somebody, that at the music store knew me, and they were like, "Oh, we want to show you this guitar," and they stick this, they hand me this like ES, no, it was a L50, and a Gibson L50, and so they give me this guitar, and then it was really more of a rhythm type of guitar. It was not something that you would play bebop or modern jazz on. It was chink, 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 chink kind of guitar, So I picked it up and I started playing some of that, just checking it out. Next thing on YouTube, hey, Ted Ludwig's checking out this guitar, and it's like, I was just playing a couple of chords, playing little rhythm changes on it just to see what the guitar sounded like. But you can't get, it's like, for instance, Jimmy Bruno and I sat down together to try out a guitar. We're at a festival in Colorado, great festival, and we were just trying out this guy's guitars, right? And then the next thing you know, we're both on Facebook or on YouTube. Ted Ludwig and Jimmy Bruno, and it's like we just sat down, we just messed. We didn't even really had a chance to play with. So it's like it's nowadays with this right here. It's like you got to always be on. You always have to be on. You can't like flub a dub. You can't play around and just have
Yeah.
fun in that sense. It's got to be on all the time.
Well, it even goes more than I recently saw Steve Lukather. I think it's an old video, but well, you hold up the phone. It was on the phone that I saw it, and Lukather was like, he went to a jam session, and in a situation like that where you're going to have fun, you're going to stretch out, you're going to experiment, you're going
Yeah.
to fail, like you're going out there, so it's not a high pressure environment, so you can try stuff and you're going to probably fail. And he's like, but you can't do that anymore. He's like, everybody's got a phone,
Yep.
and it's like you just so that scene is basically dead,
Yeah.
unless
You
you're
can't.
just super okay with falling on your face in front of the entire world, and so
Well, I know. I mean, I would just, you just pick up a guitar to just try it out. Hey, I've never played one. And you're in a music store. I mean, I go to a lot of these guitar festivals. I'll get invited to be a guest artist, and and I'll say, oh, some maker that I like their stuff and says, hey man, Ted, try out my new guitar. And you sit down for like five. And next thing you know, you look up and there's three guys like this. And I mean, part of that is flattering, but it's like, man, I better not miss anything because the next thing you know, it's like the next morning it's on YouTube or later that night, and it's like, and they post it. Well, here's Ted playing this, and it's like, well, man, I hope I don't slip because it's not a guitar that I'm used to, or so it's that part is really interesting. Yeah.
Ted, you mentioned guitars, and so even tonight, I just learned that there are different types of jazz guitar, even though they're all kind of similar size. You mentioned the more of a rhythm guitar versus something that you might do more quick um, action on, bebop and so forth. One of the things that it got me thinking about, one of the things that I wanted to talk about tonight, we wanted to talk about, so kind of maybe going over to the topics portion is talking about student guitars, if you don't mind. So we all know that you're a connoisseur of very fine jazz guitars, and you have an amazing sound, by the way. You just have,
Thank you.
in my opinion, a super pure, like essential jazz guitar tone. It's really, really nice. Um, and it sounds great, by the way, in your albums, as well as when people are holding up their phones and putting it on YouTube, because I've seen a few live shows as well on of your playing. And I know you teach.
I
We all
do.
teach. We're all educators, and we're always, you get a student come in and they say, "Look, this is the guitar I have, and do you think it's good enough?" Or they come in and they say, "I feel like I need a new guitar." Or they come in and they're like, "I definitely want a new guitar." And there are all these kinds of different levels of students, all these different
Hmm.
kinds of price points. There's different guitars that they come in with. You think we could just talk a little bit about that, like in terms of your, priorities, your preferences, what you recommend, and all that kind of thing?
Absolutely. So this is a fun subject. I like this subject. But You know, I think like when I was growing up, when Jonathan and I were growing up learning how to play jazz, we didn't have as many options. There was like your really lower end things like, Washburns and you had like Ibanez art cores and those kinds of guitars for jazz guitar, and so it was like that, and those just you just never could get a sound out of them. I mean, it just was hard because the electronics were not well made, and or the fretwork was really mediocre. You had to take it immediately in somewhere and have someone work on it, or it had plastic components that would rattle and buzz when you were playing. And then like the next step to something that was decent, you had to get into like a heritage guitar or something like that. There was nothing that was really in the what I would say sort of affordability for players. And that is a problem with, I'm sure, classical guitars as well.
For sure.
They're like the guitars that are really affordable are just not very good. Well, Eastman has come out with a line of instruments that I tell you is really great for the money. They've really done an amazing job, not just with their jazz guitars, but like, I know Jonathan's kind of he does a lot of like semi-hollow type. I know you have a lot of experience with semi-hollow instruments, Jonathan. So, I mean, their semi-hollows are really pretty incredible. Like for 1,200, 1,400 bucks, that you can get a really nice semi-hollow guitar. Their solid bodies are really nice as well, but they
Actually
they
looking
are
at
they are
a
what's that?
I said I'm actually looking at my orchestra model right now, and it's fantastic. It's when they kind of started teaming up with Bourgeois.
With bourgeois,
Yeah,
yeah, same thing. They're now their flat top acoustics are amazing.
yeah.
So they're like really that company I'm really floored by, and so the thing for me is I have a very good working relationship with Eastman. Um, And what I do for my students is to make, because I mean, I'll get students, like I work with Memphis Jazz Workshop, and sometimes we have students that, man, they can't afford anything. They don't even have a guitar, and so like I've got this relationship with Eastman where I can get instruments at a really good price, and I can, help. I don't just do this regularly. I mean, if someone can afford to go and buy it from the dealer, I encourage them to do that because that's how the dealers stay alive. And, but if it's like a special situation, like I have a person, I'm not going to mention any names, that's a University of Memphis student, and they they don't really have any support from their parents, and so I was able to get Eastman donated an instrument for that person. They
Wow.
sent me a beautiful carved top guitar. It's called a 503 CE. It's carved top, laminate back and sides. They put a really nice, the one that makes the Gibson pickups. Uh, I can't think of his name.
Lawler.
No, not Lawler. It
Uh,
wasn't Lawler.
This is
But
where Boyd is going to shine.
but
Come
it's
on,
a
Boyd, you can do it. What's the name?
yeah. It's
Oh, on the spot.
but
No,
they
no.
put like a Gibson pickup in it, for me, and they sent me this guitar, and they were like, try this and show it to your student, and I just gave that person the guitar,
Wow.
it's made all the difference in the world, but back to student guitars. I'm not a fan of a student buying a cheap guitar that's just cheap, because um, there's a lot of those lower end guitars that are just trash,
Yeah.
and I just try to dissuade my students from getting that. But Eastman has really like hit a grand slam with their instruments at that price range. Now,
Yeah, I've been really impressed with what Eastman has been putting out the last couple of years. But that also brings up an interesting, you know, point that when dealing with students and their
Seth
guitars.
Lover, I'm sorry, Seth
Oh,
Lover
lover,
pickup.
yeah.
I'm sorry, yeah, but go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, no, no. Uh, I have students, rank beginners, who will come in with a very fine guitar that's been passed down from a grandfather or a father. Then you got kids who come in, they're a heck of a player. They've been playing for a while, they got chops, and you can really tell the guitar they're on is holding them back now. And how
Yes.
to broach that, in order to encourage them to get something that would benefit them, but you don't always know their background. You don't know
Yes.
if they can afford it or if there's sentimental
Yes.
value with the guitar that they're holding on to. So I think that is, something, if you have some
Yes.
experience with that, kind of
Oh, I
sharing.
have a lot of experience with that. And so, for instance, I hear jazz guitar players can be pretty bad because a lot of jazz guitar players have this attitude like, I don't need to spend $10,000 for a guitar. It's like I married a violinist, and I love her to death. But like, you don't know what expensive is until you start looking at violins and violin bows.
Yeah.
That's when you start to see some. I mean, you see like, oh, this bow, it's not really that bad. $12,000. It's like $12,000 for a bow.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's like, and it's just like a stick of wood, you know.
Yeah.
But it's I mean, like, I mean, and not all bows are that expensive, but I mean, you have to spend a certain amount to be able to get an instrument that's going to help push you forward in your career. So where do you go from, like you were saying, Mike, where you have a student that has a mediocre intermediate level instrument or maybe a beginner instrument, and you have to say, well, we have to step them into something decent. Well, I go, if it's a student that's, say, like high school age, or below that, I go to the parents. I'm like, listen, you know this instrument is not doing you guys any favors, and it's holding your child back. and we need to start to think about some other options. Like I said, now, like we all are probably fairly similar in age. I mean, I remember when a jazz guitar, like I said, there was the real low end stuff, and then you had to jump way up, so there was no sort of middle ground. Eastman has bridged that gap incredibly beautifully, and so, and I know even some professional players that'll use their guitars, and use them. They've stepped up their game with their electronics big time. So, and that's because of Otto D'Ambrosio. Otto D'Ambrosio is a wonderful luthier, and he's their chief designer, and he's amazing. He's amazing. They're also doing this nylon string that the Buscarino guitar, the Buscarino Cabaret guitar. To buy one from Buscarino's over 10 grand. They're making them for like a third of the price. Eastman's making them, and I'm gonna tell you, you can barely tell the difference.
Really?
But I want to get back to the question. I got off topic. So at that point, what I'll usually do is, for instance, I'll have some students, because I play seven string. They'll say, "Well, I want to get into a seven string," because they see what I do with the seven string, and they're like, "Well, I like the sound of that. I want to try that." Well, your options become much more limited because they're not really readily available. You can't really go to like a Carter Vintage and readily find like a Gibson seven string, or a Heritage. So you have to go get something that's sort of custom.
Yeah.
So one thing I do is I encourage them, if they don't have a lot of money together, if they don't have $6,000, $8,000 together to sort of be able to go buy something in that price range. One thing that I encourage them is to work with a luthier, because, for instance, I have a very dear friend who's a luthier, and I send him a lot of business. I try to. His name's Wyatt Wilkie, great maker out of British Columbia, and what he'll do is he'll make the deposit maybe at $2,000, and he'll work with them. Or if they're like, "Well, man, I only have 1,500," say, "Well, that's fine. Send me the 1,500, and then when you get the other 500, you can send that." And he puts them on the list, and then it'll take like a year and a half to 2 years for them to get their instrument, but it gives them time to sort of get their money together, and that's an option because. And then Wyatt's actually doing a signature model that he's starting for me. He's doing one for Jimmy Bruno, and but what it is he's making it to where it's less expensive than his typical models. He's doing them in a way where they're just a little less expensive, and so it's allowing me to sort of offer a guitar to younger players that it's not like it won't break the bank. Yeah, it doesn't have my signature across the pick guard or something. I have a signature that's on the label, so it's inside the guitar. But I designed the guitar with him, and then he doesn't have to do a lot of customization. So those customizations is what sort of makes it more time. So if it's already pre-designed and what we're going to do, and it's to some very standard specs, and they can get it in a 6 or a 7 string, it allows them to get into something really great without it being like $20,000 to $30,000, and that's the thing. A lot of these makers have just gone up so much in their prices. It is insane.
Yeah.
So now the pre-owned market is a really great place to look. There are a couple of makers um, that have kept their prices more in the range of a player. Now I hear makers say, I'm friends with a lot of makers. I hear them say like, "Well, man, I'm trying to make this player, comfortable for a player." And I'm like, "Oh, what are we looking at?" "Oh, well, 19,500." I'm like, "Really? A player's not going to spend that. A player can't spend that. A player can barely spend half that." You know what I'm saying? I was like, so that is not player friendly.
Yeah.
Now, I know collectors will pay that, or I mean, the unfortunate thing, and it's really the unfortunate thing, is the people that own these great instruments can't play to save, they can't play themselves out of a paper bag. And there's a shame about that, and then you get like really good players, and then you can't help to try to put something together, so but I really do bend over backwards to try to help uh my students to find an instrument. For instance, I'm going to show you something. So like, I have some friends that collect a lot of guitars, and they'll send guitars that they want to sell to me. So I've got this guitar. Now this is a beautiful instrument, and it's a gorgeous guitar. It's a Mark Campolone. Look at the wood on that thing. And this
Nice.
maker has kept his prices very reasonable, and his guitars are amazing. They're very Gibson like, as far as they have that sort of L5 Johnny
Yeah,
Smith
sure.
kind of, more like a Johnny Smith kind of vibe. Really beautiful materials. But this guitar is well under 10,000. Like well under 10,000.
Right.
This guitar from him new is probably maybe getting a little closer to 10,000, but I can offer, and this thing isn't like dead mint. I mean, you would,
Yeah.
if I told you it just came out of his factory, I mean, out of his shop,
Yeah.
recently, you might not disagree with me, but
Right.
there's certain makers that you can get their instruments at a better price. The
Ted,
problem
don't you have
is,
a Foster?
not anymore.
Not anymore.
I
Okay.
had I had several Fosters, and I had Wyatt Wilkie contacted me and offered me an opportunity to play his guitars, and it was during the pandemic. I didn't have any extra cash that I was comfortable spending on it, and so he says, "Well, why don't you send me your Foster?" That was my black one that I played all the
I
time.
thought it was black. I thought I remembered you having a black one.
Yeah, I had that one, and then I ended up, I wasn't using it because I got that Manzer, and that became, I mean,
Oh, the
that's
Manster. Right. That's right.
yeah. I've got some really incredible instruments. I
Yeah, when
have
I was in school down in Hattiesburg, that's the early aughts. It seemed like everybody who played a seven string or not in New Orleans, man, like every other player had a Foster.
Yep, and a lot of those players I took to Jimmy. So one of the things that I do is I like to connect my students with the makers, and I think it's really important. I think it does two things. It lets the student get to really develop a relationship with the maker, but also it it helps the maker to get orders. And usually, the majority of makers, if they really want to work with a player, they will. And I'm not going to talk specifically about prices, but Linda Manzer's guitars are extraordinarily cost prohibitive for players. I mean, Pat Metheny's got like 27, I think, of her guitars. He's the largest collector of Linda's instruments. And several of them are historically significant, like the Picasso guitar and the baritone nylon string, and I have and so when I met Linda, and a lot of the videos you see out there of me playing that's the red guitar with the and that's a pretty well known guitar for if you've checked me out. Um, you know, I saw her at her booth, and I wasn't even going to go over there because I knew kind of what to expect in the price, So I was like, man, and my wife was like, "Who's that? Her guitars are beautiful." And I said, "That's Linda Manzer." I said, "She's a Canadian maker, and she really, really makes amazing guitars, but there's no way I could afford one." And so I went to her booth and I sat down, and so my wife was looking at she did this model for Pat Metheny called the Manzer Metheny, and it was a it looked like Pat's hieroglyphics that he drew. Like you see him on some of his records, these hieroglyphics, these kind of like little things he draw. Well, she took a whole bunch of those and she had them spilling down the fingerboard.
Cool.
Really cool design, and so my wife was looking at one of those. She did a limited edition of, I think, 30. And and so there was one of those in the booth, and but I'm looking behind her, I saw this guitar which I had seen in many books called the Wildwood. And so I said, is that the Wildwood guitar? And she said, how did you know that? And I was like, I'd been studying her stuff quite a bit. So I started playing that guitar, and I just was playing it. And then this really great guitarist named David Gilmour, not Gilmour from Pink Floyd, but the David Gilmour that played with Wayne Shorter, and teaches at Berkeley. He comes over and we start playing duets, in Linda's booth, and so and then like my wife comes over and she's like, you should probably let somebody else play that guitar because you've been playing it for 4 hours. And I went, no, I haven't. I just,
Whoa.
just picked it up. And I said, Linda, how long have I been playing this guitar? And she says, well, you sat down at about 11:30 and it's 3:30. I went,
Wow.
whoa. So I handed the guitar back, and I realized my fingers were sore. They were rough because on that she put those phosphor bronze strings, which I'm not. I don't. I mean, I'm a I played plugged in, so But my fingers were sore. But I wasn't. I didn't care, man. I just wanted to play that guitar. I was really sucking up the sound.
Wow.
And then the next day, I ended up going back over to her booth, and she had it all set up with electric strings. And so I played it for a while, and then happened to be this one moment where she she said, this one moment where like she wasn't getting like people pounding, trying to get to her to talk to her. It was just this moment. It was quiet, and it was just she and I. And she said, "I want to build you a guitar."
Nice.
And I said, well, you know, I don't know. I said, Linda, I don't know how I could pay for it. I just, and she was like, well, I make these prices up, right? And I said, and she says, I can charge you whatever I want. She goes, let me think. She goes, what would you want? And so then it made me relax. And I was like, well, maybe this could happen, So I told her exactly what I wanted. And, and then she called me about 3 weeks later, and she says, oh, let's talk a little bit, So we talked, and then you know, she gave me a price, and it was still quite a bit of money, but it was something that I could do,
Mhm.
And she says, you can just send me, $500 a month or something, whatever and if there's a month that's bad, you have a slow month, or you don't have the extra cash, that's okay. Just, it's okay. There's no, and so I just started chipping away at it,
Yeah.
and then I started sending her clients, friends of mine, students of mine. And then the next thing you know, I sent her so many, she was like, you don't owe me any more money. She just keep sending me students, keep playing,
That's
you
great.
know, and
That's great.
I'll show you. So I ordered that guitar, and like it took 2 years to get it, but this is it.
Wow.
This is it. That's the Manzer. She put the orchid in the
Yeah.
headstock for me, and with the
Wow.
scroll. And I
Wow.
wanted
Wow.
the big split block inlays, traditional sound holes.
Oof. Look at
Yeah, the
that.
sound holes are great, actually.
Man.
And
I
then she
was,
put a sound port in it for me.
Hey, all right. Look at that.
nice.
And it's got a really beautiful back. It's kind of hard to see in this lighting, but
Oh no, we can I can
The
I
flame.
can tell.
and yeah, it's just really something. Very fortunate to have this instrument.
Wow.
So, and then, but I've sent, I've sent, I have to be careful. Um, I have to be careful, on how many people. I mean, I have to be careful on who I send to her. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fantastic. That's
Yeah.
thanks for sharing about all that.
Yeah.
Um I guess we have just one more thing I wanted to ask you about, Ted, and that is
Yeah.
your next creative project. I know that a recent creative project was an album that has been highly celebrated, and people are talking about it on Jazz Guitar Today. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering what your next creative project is.
Well, well, I have a couple of projects. I have a record that came out this year, which is Essential Jazz Guitar. And in fact, I'm on the cover of the Jazz Guitar Today magazine, which I was totally flattered when they wanted to do that. But this was this month's issue, and they called it Ted Plays Essential Jazz Guitar, and so that was that.
You got a
So
True
that's the
Fire
new
course too,
record.
right?
What's that?
You got a True Fire course too, right?
I have 9 True Fire courses.
Nice.
Wow.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those are really I mean those are doing well, and I really have a great relationship. In fact, I've been doing something this month with them called Ask the Artist. It's a program that they have, but and the guitar that's on the cover that's my Wilkie Paramount. That's an amazing guitar. It's in the other room. I'll pull it out and show it to you, but it's in the case in another room. And I have this beautiful Rebecca, but I want to get back to your question. So another project that I'm doing is I'm working on this record with Pat Bianchi. We got all the tracking done. I just have to do some edits, a few edits that I want to make with that, and then I'll start the mixing. So I'm hoping that that has Pat Bianchi and Ulysses Owens Jr.'s on some of it on drums, and Stephen Pruitt, and then I have a couple of saxophone players that are on it too, Paul Carr and Jerry Weldon on
Ooh.
that. So that's a future. I mean, that's hopefully going to come out next year, or hopefully it's maybe spring. I'm thinking, uh, and then probably late spring. And then I want to do a record. Actually, I haven't. I want to do a duo record with another guitar player. I don't really. I have to. I don't want to talk about it quite yet, but but I
Fair
want to.
enough.
I need to see if that person. I'm going to try to get it lined up before I say anything. And
Look,
then
Ted,
I'm also working.
Ted, I accept. I'll do it. It's okay. Just I'll
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've been talking. I mean, I kind of mentioned it to him, and he wanted to do it, and so I just have to make sure that that's going to happen
That's
before I
great.
go mention it.
It's okay. Yeah, no, he mentioned it to me too, and yeah, I'm fine. I'm free as well. I'm good.
And then I'm actually
We're
working
all
on
friends here, Ted.
some ideas to do a record with my wife on
Oh,
violin
wow.
and guitar.
Oh,
That would be
nice.
very cool. That would be very
And
cool.
she's got some classical pieces she wants to record, but I told her, I said, you don't want me to play that, yeah. So, so
Those all
those are,
sound really, really exciting. We'll definitely be on the lookout. And I just want to encourage our listeners and viewers to check out Essential Jazz Guitar, the album that recently came out. Um, you can also read about it in the magazine online that and in print. Is it in print as well, Ted?
uh, you talking about Essential Jazz Guitar?
The Jazz Guitar Today
Oh,
magazine.
I'm sorry, Jazz Guitar Today. I'm sorry, my wife's texting me. No, it's only online.
Okay, well, very
This
good.
was this was I this was me going, hey, I'm on the cover. I want to. So this is actually printed
Yeah,
on a
yeah,
board that
absolutely,
I was like,
absolutely.
I gotta at least get it put on there so I can have it for
Yeah, for sure.
I mean,
Right,
it's
that's
just
very cool.
But
yeah. But oh, check this guitar out. Just you can see what my favorite subject is. This is one Chris Mirabella built for me. Look at this thing.
wow,
Isn't that cool? That's
goodness
a great
gracious,
guitar. Yeah. And it's got a sound port as well. I really like the sound port thing, it's great. So
beautiful.
that's a really cool instrument. I've been playing
It's
it a
almost got a
lot
Hofner
lately.
vibe.
And then I go, it's crazy. I go like I'll play one for a while and then I'll say, I want to play on my other one, and I'll pick it up and play it. So, and then I have a classical guitar too.
Nice.
um I had this maker in Spain built it for me. His name is Are you familiar with let me think about this. Is it Manuel Contreras?
Yeah.
You familiar with Manuel Contreras?
Oh
Well,
yeah.
Manuel Contreras had a guy that was working for him and kind of was his hands, especially when Manuel the first was getting older. There was a guy named Jose Lagunar, and he he was sort of Contreras's hands, and he got, and then when Manuel the second took over, Lagunar built many of his guitars, did a lot of the grunt work, and then also like maybe more of the lesser expensive instruments that they produced, and then as he got less able to do all of the work himself, Lagunar built all his guitars from. So the last, like, I don't know, 8 or 10 years of that company, all the instruments were 100% built by Lagunar, and then he decided to start making on his own. And so I have one of his guitars, Jose Lagunar, and his instruments were very reasonable, like $3,500,
Hmm.
for a really great guitar.
I
So
will.
that's what I have. I have one of those, and then I
Nice.
have a 7-string Manzer nylon string arch
Wow.
top. That's cool.
Wow. Very nice.
Yeah. So
Um, well, Ted, we have taken enough of your precious time. You seem to be extremely busy with a lot of creative projects and
well,
And
you had a
guitars.
question. You had a question on that you sent me that I just wanted to make a quick statement about. You
sure.
said, "What is the most important thing about maintaining a career?"
Okay.
This is something that I want to say.
Sure.
Okay.
I think for all of us, and I think we all know this, you
Okay.
just have to be resourceful. You have to be able to play gigs. You have to be nice to people. You have to be able to like meet with people and be diplomatic about things. You have to be able to work with students and encourage students. You have to be, all these different things are important because if it was only gigs, I would not be able to make a living. I mean, I would make money, but I would not be able to make enough to like consistently every week know that I'm going to bring in a certain amount of money,
Yeah.
because, gigs come and go. You might get a week that it's feast or famine. Might get a week that's great and you have 3 or 4 really good paying gigs. And then the next week you got like 2 gigs that are $150 each. And you
Yeah.
can't survive on that, but like, I have the True Fire thing I'm doing. I work with Memphis Jazz Workshop, and that's a great thing. I really enjoy working with those kids. I have a private studio of about, and usually per week, I mean, I have like 20 some odd students, but they don't all come at the same time. Some come every week, some don't, and then I've got gigs. I'm gigging. I travel, all around doing gigs. So, and then I do recordings. I do session work. So it's like that's the most important thing is you've got to be resourceful. If you're gonna just like be a professional musician, it's hard to just do it with one thing.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Totally agree. It's a
We three of us talk about this a lot, and kids need to hear that all the time.
You got to be resourceful,
It's
and
not just a thing.
and
Yeah.
then I kind of get a little frustrated because like especially, well, there's certain towns where it's like, well, you can't play jazz here, you're not going to make a living. Well, why can't you play jazz? Why do I have to play a whole bunch? Why do I have to be a jack of all trades guitar player? I want to play jazz. I mean, I studied this music and I want to play this. So, I mean, maybe I would get more gigs if I was like, hey, I'm going to go learn, 300 like R&B tunes. But I don't want to do that. I don't want to play that. I didn't, that's not why I get up in the morning. I get up in the morning because I want to play jazz guitar,
yeah.
and so like then it's like, well, you're not going to play every night, but you're going to, but like why can't you play classical? You love classical. You should be able to play classical. Well, it becomes, certain styles of music, it becomes easier to sort of put a living together. But I mean, I want to play jazz guitar, and
Yeah.
that's what I do best, and that's where my voice is.
Yeah. Yeah. And we
So
and we look forward to hearing you play jazz guitar for many more years to come, Ted.
well,
Cheers.
yes. Thank you guys for having me.
Oh, it
Thank
is
you,
our
Ted.
honor. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Ted Ludwig, be on the lookout for his recordings if he's coming near you, and for future True Fire and also past True Fire education. And just thank you so much again, Ted. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right, everyone, that was Ted Ludwig. That's actually our very first guest on this podcast. So we're super excited to have such a jazz guitar luminary as our first guest. Our next guest is going to be recorded just next week, and that's going to be another jazz great, Eric Merchant. Eric Merchant is a New Orleans-based guitarist, an amazing bebop player, and someone who I've had the pleasure of studying with for a number of years. And we're going to be talking to him next week. One thing that we thought would be cool for our listeners is to invite you all to send in questions. So if you happen to know Eric, or if you happen to have questions about, his style of music or anything that you might want to hear him talk about, go ahead and leave a comment in this week's video on YouTube. You can do it that way, or you can also send an email to the following email address, and that is pluckthatguitarpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, that's pluckthatguitarpodcast@gmail.com. I would always welcome feedback and things like that as well. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like our videos and subscribe to the channel, and be sure to follow our show on your podcast platforms. And that is it for this week for Pluck That. Thanks very much.